David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Remember when executive orders were bad? And what I mean by that is, remember when Barack Obama was president and Donald Trump said that Barack Obama using executive orders is bad? Remember, for example, this tweet from July 2012, quote, "Why is Barack Obama constantly issuing executive orders that are major power grabs of authority?" Or do you remember when Donald Trump tweeted about Barack Obama's executive order use, quote, "Republicans must not allow President Obama to subvert the Constitution of the United States for his own benefit and because he is unable to negotiate with Congress." Well, Donald Trump now facing the total and complete failure of his attempt to push a citizenship question into the upcoming 2020 census plans to use none other than an executive order to force that question into the census, despite the Supreme Court saying no, and despite two federal judges interfering and getting involved in this thing as well. Nice, right? Trump has suffered a bunch of different failures on this question, and now he's going to the exact mechanism that he criticized Barack Obama for using. The Supreme Court ruled last month that Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary simply didn't provide an adequate reason for putting that citizenship question on the census. And then not one, but two federal judges have refused to allow the Department of Justice to withdraw their lawyers from a lawsuit over the citizenship question. And as a reminder for us who understand what's going on here, the reason that Donald Trump and Republicans love the idea of putting the citizenship question on the 2020 census is that they understand that real demographic changes in the United States and population moves and ideological shifts to the left don't help them if everybody is counted properly and correctly. They know that putting a citizenship question on the 2020 census will reduce the number of immigrants who fill it out, including legal immigrants, understand. And this will create data that will allow a more favorable allocation of funds and districting for the Republican political agenda. Executive orders used to be derided as overreaches of the Oval Office when it was Barack Obama using them, who, by the way, used them far less than his Republican predecessors and less than Donald Trump. Trump specifically criticized Obama for his use of executive orders, and then he comes in and puts in place more executive orders than Barack Obama did on a per month basis. Trump is using executive orders like get out of jail free cards, like bailouts. When he can't actually get something done, he uses an executive order, or at least he tries to use an executive order, and the numbers are quite stunning. Donald Trump has so far signed 115 executive orders. That means 3.7 per month. Barack Obama, in comparison, signed 2.8 executive orders per month. So Donald Trump, despite slamming Barack Obama for executive orders, is signing them at a rate that is nearly 1/3 higher than Barack Obama. But that's okay, because the problem isn't actually executive orders. The problem is Democrats. The problem was Barack Obama. This is sort of like debt and deficit. I've talked about this many times before. Republicans claim to be, their rhetoric claims that they're about balancing the budget. They want to reduce the deficit. They want to pay off the debt. They want to account for every dollar of spending by making sure that it is covered someplace else when they're running or when it's a Democrat that's in the White House. As soon as they get into office, they blow up the deficit. George W. Bush did it during his 2 terms. Donald Trump has done it. It's just a political football. They don't care. And it's the same thing with executive orders. This is sport to them, okay? They claim to be about principles. And there's a big movement, in fact, on the right that claims to be all about sticking to our principles and our stated values, except they don't. They don't do it when it comes to executive orders. They don't do it when it comes to debt and deficit. Look at evangelical support for Donald Trump. They claim to be about family values, but in the end, they're just about not Democrats, right? In the end, despite Donald Trump's affairs, despite Donald Trump's 15+ sexual assault allegations and grab him by the pussy and the entire thing, in the end, even the evangelicals who claim that their values run completely counter to Donald Trump ended up voting for Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. Part of it is they don't actually want to vote for a Democrat. Part of it is the abortion issue, which is the only issue for many evangelicals in this country. This is this is checking off boxes. This is wins and losses. This is sport. This is not principles. And this is why, at its face, the argument about principles being the only important thing is bogus. The reality is principles can serve as a guideline, but the real hard work is figuring out specific situations, not just having a list of principles. But more importantly, they are hypocrites. They don't even care about the principles they claim to espouse. The executive order thing is proof. Evangelicals voting for Trump is proof. And of course, no question that debt and deficit has been proof for a very long time. And that's a much bigger issue than Donald Trump. Will he succeed in using the executive order to push the citizenship question into the census? I don't know the answer. This is very early. We just learned he was doing this hours ago. You may even know more about it by the time that this today's program goes live. We'll see. Maybe by tomorrow or by Monday, we'll know more about it. Okay, so I told you at the start of this week that if the recent polling trends continued, by the end of this week or maybe by early next week, Joe Biden could be out of first place in the Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders could be all the way down to fourth place. That was if the recent trends continued, and they have not. Okay, the trends have reversed. Both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders have recovered a little bit of that support that they recently lost in the last 10 to 14 days or so. Both Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, who have been the big gainers since the over the last 10 days or since the Democratic debate, have leveled off. So as of now, Joe Biden is still in first place, although certainly by a smaller margin than he has been. Bernie Sanders is back into second place, but just barely, while Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren are sort of steady in third and fourth places, respectively. Now, what I want to deal with today is I want to think about if and when should the candidates polling under 1% abandon the race? If and when should the candidates polling under 2% get out of this race? There are lots of them, okay? According to the Real Clear Politics average of recent polls, there are currently 9 candidates polling under 1%. Those are Delaney, Tim Ryan, Marianne Williamson, Kirsten Gillibrand, Bennett and Hickenlooper, Bill de Blasio, Jay Inslee, and Bullock. 9 candidates currently polling under 1%. Now, you'll notice that Eric Swalwell is not on the list. He was at the debate a week or two ago, but he ended his presidential run earlier this week, recognizing he's getting absolutely no traction whatsoever, something some of the others, it's unclear whether they recognize or not, or at least it's unclear whether they care. So that's the 9 under 1%. In addition, there are 4 more candidates polling between 1 and 2%. Those are Amy Klobuchar, Andrew Yang, Julian Castro, and Tulsi Gabbard. And then just barely eking out 2% are Cory Booker at 2.1 and Beto O'Rourke with 2.6. Now, a few thoughts about this before we move on and really dig into what is it that these candidates should be doing. It's kind of a tragedy that Beto is ahead of Julian Castro. Beto imploded in the presidential debate, in the Democratic primary debate a couple of weeks ago. Julian Castro was actually quite strong, but Beto is still slightly ahead. That's unfortunate. Number 2, similarly, Amy Klobuchar was a train wreck in that first debate, while Kirsten Gillibrand actually did pretty well. I don't agree with her on all policy, but just in evaluating debate performance, Gillibrand did significantly better than Klobuchar. Klobuchar somehow ahead of Gillibrand. But again, this is all, like, they're all polling so little. They're kind of all within the margin of error in a sense. So the immediate question is, how long should these candidates stay in the race? I am for more candidates. I am for more choices. I'm for more debate and more dialogue and different ideas as part of the primary process. But I also want there to be more depth in the debates. That can't happen when you have 20 candidates across 2 stages and 30-second rebuttals as the standard format, okay? So I do believe that we would in many ways benefit from starting to trim the field down. We polled our audience on YouTube at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show/community. The question was, who should exit the Democratic primary before the next debates at the end of this month? 7% of our audience say everybody should stay in. 48% want everyone polling under 5% to get out, which is very harsh. 22% say everybody under 2% should get out, and 15% say everyone under 1% should get out. Now, just as a thought experiment, If everybody under 5% got out today, that would leave only 5 candidates. And that includes Pete Buttigieg at exactly 5% and not a fraction more. It seems a bit aggressive to me at this point in time. We're still about a year out from the convention. But certainly, if you're still under 1% at this point in time, you have no shot. I would get out. I think that the 2%ers could make the case for staying in to this second debate. There's a good chance they'll be eliminated by the requirements before the third debate on September 12th and 13th anyway. The next debate is at the end of this month, July 30 and 31 on CNN. A lot of these, the 2%ers, many of them are going to be gone before the third debate anyway, because they're simply not going to qualify. So as a reminder, to make that early September third debate, candidates need to have both at least 2% in 4 different polls and 130,000 unique donors. As of right now, only Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Pete Buttigieg have met that criteria. So this race will be effectively smaller by September 12th, even if a lot of these candidates stay in. They're not going to be on that third debate stage unless things change radically. And potentially we will be down to just 1 debate stage by September 12th instead of having to do it on 2 nights. So let me know what you think. Our audience, at least on YouTube, an unscientific reflection merely of the fraction of our nearly 700,000 YouTube subscribers who chose to vote in this poll, say if you're under 5%, you should get out immediately. That seems a little bit aggressive, but a lot of these folks will be gone by September 12th. Let me know what you think. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and voting is still open on the David Pakman Show YouTube channel if you want to cast your vote.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's thank some people. Let's get that out of the way. Mark Danielson is today's new David Pakman Show member of the day, and Susan Crane is another new David Pakman Show member of the day. We have fortunately, this is a great problem to have, as we say in the business. We have had such an increase in membership support recently that I've fallen so behind on thanking new members that I'm now thanking 2 every day to try to get caught up. Mark Danielson and Susan Crane. Also want to say thanks to Jerry Gaston, who is our longtime sustaining member of the day. Jerry's been with us almost 5 years. Dating back to 2014, membership, the #1 funding source for the David Pakman Show, particularly in light of recent YouTube demonetization, as we've been talking about, which I won't bore you with today. We've been talking enough about it this week. I won't talk about it anymore. You can sign up at www.joinpakman.com. One of the best places to engage in political discussions with other viewers and listeners of the David Pakman Show is the David Pakman Show subreddit. I am a regular on the subreddit. I am in there all the time mixing it up with people. So is producer Pat. You can find it at davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT. Couple of interesting posts I want to talk about. There was an inquiry about whether it would be difficult for me to transition over to Twitch, a live streaming platform that is huge, twitch.tv, mostly or at least significantly for video game streaming, which I don't really play. But I have been thinking about what to do on Twitch, and I actually have made an account, and I am going to do a premiere stream on Twitch sometime soon. I don't exactly know what to do. I had the idea of, since the only thing close to a game that I play is chess, I could live stream some chess playing, play against members of the audience if they want, take questions, and just sort of hang out. Now, someone reached out and said, you didn't really build an audience playing chess. You built an audience talking about politics, so that might be a mistake to do on Twitch. So I don't know exactly what I would do on Twitch. Twitch has this requirement, if you want to monetize your content, that the content has to be unique to Twitch, or at least initially only on Twitch. You can later upload it to YouTube if you want, but it has to first be on Twitch if you want to monetize it. So just uploading our YouTube content to Twitch is not, I don't even know if it's possible, but it's not something that we should be doing. Same thing with simultaneously streaming to Twitch and YouTube. So I'm open to ideas. Let me know what you think would be interesting for me to do on Twitch. I'm on Twitch. I believe it's just David Pakman. And you can follow me there in advance of this extraordinarily compelling premiere that has as of yet not been scheduled. But more importantly, let me know what I could be doing on Twitch that would be different than what we're doing on our other platforms, interesting, and maybe start to generate an audience there. Also from the David Pakman Show subreddit, White House social media summit to snub tech giants, host conservative personalities. Yeah, I was talking to Tim Pool yesterday, who I know that despite our political disagreements, it may come as a shock that we actually are in touch privately. But we've always actually had a good relationship, regardless of our political disagreements. I was talking to him. Tim Pool is invited, and it's basically all right wingers. And I said to him, Tim, it would be really amazing if you were able to get on video telling Trump there really should be some left wingers here because they're actually also being affected by all of the issues that we're talking about. And I told him extra points if he mentions my name to Trump. I don't actually think that he's going to do it. Maybe by the time you watch this clip, we will know whether anything like that happened. But yeah, I mean, the selection of people that were invited, including I think there was one person invited to this summit who has 3,000 followers on Twitter, if I recall correctly. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I believe that that's what I saw. And like Google and Facebook weren't even invited. And obviously no progressive was invited who has an independent online platform. So I don't know whether any big problems are going to be solved at this tech summit, but I do look forward to seeing video of it, which may be available by the time you listen to me talk about this. Join the subreddit. More than 11,000 of our viewers and listeners now on the subreddit at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. The Reddit is not a throwaway, okay? The Reddit regularly contributes content to the show. I'm personally on the subreddit. I am paying attention to what's going on there. So please participate. Okay, so today we have two specific races that I'm going to talk about for 2020 where we really have extraordinarily inspiring, I guess I would call them, opportunities to take down some of the most prominent and toxic Republicans in the Senate. Yesterday, I told you that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has a challenger. Later on in the show, I'll talk to you a little bit more about that race. But first today, totally terribly toxic Trump tool, how about that? Lindsey Graham has an opponent, and the opponent has raised a record-breaking amount of money. His name is Jaime Harrison. He has raised $1.5 million to challenge Lindsey Graham in South Carolina for his Senate seat. And if you haven't been paying attention to Lindsey, he has become even more unhinged under Donald Trump, unleashing one of the most cartoonish and embarrassing tirades that maybe I've ever seen during the confirmation hearing of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Remember when this went down?
If you wanted an FBI investigation, you could have come to us. What you want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. You've said that, not me. You've got nothing to apologize for. When you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsey said hello, because I voted for them. I would never do to them what you've done to this guy. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics.
That was real life. That was not part of some poorly scripted political drama or reality show and a faux reality show. It would be really great to remove Lindsey Graham, and Jaime Harrison conceivably could make that happen. Now, I always am realistic with you in these races. I don't do the thing where I pretend that someone polling 1% really has a shot at winning in the presidential primary. And I'm not going to BS you here either. Jaime Harrison is way behind. He's raised $1.5 million, but Lindsey Graham has nearly $5 million or had $5 million in the bank at the end of the first quarter of the year. And they're still calculating their second quarter total. So he may have three or four times as much money as Jaime Harrison, and money matters in our political system, as you know. But this is one of the strongest candidates in recent history to really have a shot at taking out such a prominent Republican senator. Beto had a shot with Ted Cruz in Texas, ultimately didn't happen. Jaime Harrison is, admittedly, like many of these Southern Democrats, basically a centrist establishment guy. But given the circumstances, that's okay, because we'd be much better off with Jaime Harrison than with Lindsey Graham, particularly in a state like South Carolina. Jaime Harrison is a top official for the Democratic National Committee. He's former chairman of the South Carolina Democratic Party. He's an establishment guy. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But Lindsey Graham is just terrible. And the polls are pointing to an uphill battle. Graham has a big lead in the polls as of right now. But okay, we still have a while. Let's see what we can do. And as I said before yesterday, talking about the Mitch McConnell challenger in Kentucky, the key is that even if Jaime Harrison doesn't defeat Lindsey Graham in the end, even if Amy McGrath doesn't ultimately take out Mitch McConnell in 2020, getting the Republican Party to have to spend a bunch of money defending incumbents in red states makes it more difficult for them to win other seats because of limited money that they obviously have. And that's a very good thing. And people have been writing to me about Lindsey Graham saying, even though it goes against our principles on the left, shouldn't the left be targeting Lindsey Graham for being gay because Republicans don't like it and they might vote him out? I totally disagree with that strategy. Number one, it's below us to stoop to that level, okay? We don't think there's anything wrong with being gay, so why would we target another candidate because they are, I don't know if Lindsey, I don't know what to what level of how publicly Lindsey Graham is gay. But I don't think it's a good idea for Democrats to be doing this because it's just the wrong thing to do and there's nothing wrong with being gay. But more importantly, I also don't think it would work. The right claims to be about family values, but when it comes down to it, they voted for Trump, who was accused 15 times or more of sexual assault, the mistresses, the entire thing. They don't actually care. They're not going to vote for a Democrat, most of them anyway. And in the same way, yeah, the anti-gay religious right in South Carolina, I get it, but they don't actually care if the alternative to Lindsey Graham is voting for a Democrat because this is sport to them. They see this as wins and losses, period. It's below us and it's wrong to start using Lindsey Graham's sexual orientation against him. And by the way, it also wouldn't be useful. So that's what's going on with Lindsey Graham. A little bit later on in the program, I want to update you about what's going on in Amy McGrath's challenge of Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. The fundraising numbers are stunning for Amy McGrath. But that's coming up a little bit later. Make sure that you are following the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. Follow me on Instagram at david.pakman. I recently posted a behind-the-scenes shot of what the studio here looks like, what I'm looking at while I'm taping the show. Follow me at david.pakman on Instagram to see that and much, much more. Quick break, as they always are, and back right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Okay, as it sometimes happens on the show, we will have problems with last-minute guest cancellations, and today was one of those days. So in order to not delay production of the show, which would be hugely disrespectful to our audience, we're going to take a few phone calls. There are a lot of people who want to get on today and see what is on people's minds. Of course, the phone number is always 617-830-4750. Let's go first to our caller from the 520 area code. 520, what's your name and where are you calling from today?
Hey, what's up, David? This is Justin calling from Albuquerque.
Hey, Justin, what's going on?
Hey, I was just wondering your opinion on people who become sort of apolitical for one reason or another. Like I've met quite a few people who like sort of fell for the Donald Trump rhetoric, and they just like decide that politics is evil in general. So do you think that it would be worth trying to talk those people back into politics?
Well, so when you say they fell for Trump, did they vote for Trump and then after voting for him say they're no longer engaging with politics? What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, but in several cases of people I've met, they voted for Trump, or they just decided that Trump and Hillary were equivalent. And I could see how they came to that conclusion, because when I was younger, I could maybe fall for that kind of mindset. But I was just wondering if you thought it would be worth trying to talk them into politics, or if they would maybe fall for the same sort of rhetoric.
Well, here's the thing. Here's what I think is important to explain to those folks. In the same way that not voting is not a neutral act, when you don't vote, that is a proactive decision you make not to participate, and it does tend to help Republicans. So if you're saying I'm just not going to vote and I'm staying out of it, you're actually typically helping the more conservative candidate in most places, who often is a Republican. In primaries, you end up helping often the most extreme Republican. In the same way, you can opt out of participating in the electoral process. You can't really opt out of politics. I mean, if you don't live in the middle of nowhere in a completely, disconnected way in some kind of state of nature in rural northern Alaska or something like that, and even then, this may not even apply, you are subject to what is going on politically. If you're in touch with the financial system, if you have a job, if you earn money, if you have a house, whatever, you are involved in politics. You might be choosing not to participate electorally, but I think the point I would make to people when they say I'm just not involved in politics is you're involved in politics. You're just choosing not to try to influence what that looks like. But either way, you're involved and affected by it. That's the reality. You can't really not be.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, but do you think that people kind of avoid politics for emotional reasons or well-being reasons?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, listen, it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and particularly now, it's extremely depressing. And from the time I'm done with the Friday show until the weekend ends and I start preparing the Monday show, I pay attention to no news in politics, and it's particular. I understand the instinct. I just think it all ultimately comes down to you're affected by politics no matter whether you participate or not. And it's a question of, do you want to have a say or don't you? But either way, you are going to suffer from the repercussions of the decisions made by those who are participating.
And if I could quickly ask a follow-up, if you get the sense that someone is avoiding politics for those emotional reasons, do you think that it would be bad to try to talk them into this? Because from my perspective, things have just gotten so intense that it's like you said, you have to be involved, but you have to talk them
listen, I would be empathetic.
Into being involved.
I would say I would be empathetic. I would say I understand that. What I would encourage them to consider is that the short-term increased involvement, if we all did it, might give us significant longer-term significantly better longer-term circumstances during which we can focus on other areas of our lives without having to be so worried about what it is that's going on in Washington. That's the argument I would make. Justin, thank you. I really appreciate the call. I've got a bunch of people holding, so I'm going to let you go, but I do hope to hear from you again. Let's see. Okay, why don't we go to our caller from the 248 area code? Who's calling today from 248?
Is that me?
Yeah, that's you. Who's this?
This is Joseph from Michigan.
Hey, Joseph, what's going on?
I just wanted to give a big thank you because you and Kyle Kulinski really helped pull me out of a really far right place that I had been over the past few years.
How'd you get into that far right place?
My family's pretty liberal, so I was just, kind of like another caller I called not too long ago.
Yeah.
I just kind of, when I started getting into politics, I just automatically assumed, oh, hey, I'm just, going to be on the left. But what happened was I came across a video from a YouTuber known as Shoe on Head.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, oh, just a person on the left criticizing people on the left. But then from her, I got to Armored Skeptic, her boyfriend, now fiance, I think. And from him, I got to Blair White, and it just kept going down this rabbit hole until eventually I was watching Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern, and eventually I watched a video by T.J. Kirk where he references Kyle Kulinski. So I went to watch him, and in the recommended of the video I was watching from him, I got a video from you, and I was watching you two for the past 6 months, and you've really deprogrammed me, pulled me out of the place I was at.
Well, listen, I appreciate that. I also am a little concerned about one element of this, and this is a broader issue that goes beyond, not to pick on you, but let me ask you this. How long would you say the process was from where you sort of got politically aware on the left, was pulled into the right, and then back to the left? How long did that entire process take?
Maybe 4 years.
Okay, all right, that's less concerning. Sometimes when folks call in, Joseph, and they say a very similar story to the one you told, but they say it happened within like a year or 10 months. That's concerning to me because I'm worried that people are so malleable that they can so quickly be pulled into such extreme ideology and then just by virtue of other videos that they watch on YouTube be pulled directly out of it. Like in an ideal world, it's so great that you were pulled out of that, right? And it's absolutely fantastic that
Yeah.
happened, and I'm really glad. In an ideal world, we would be teaching critical thinking and philosophy and civics starting at an early enough age where one could not, by virtue of stumbling across some whack jobs on YouTube, be pulled into these outrageous beliefs to begin with. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. It was a very slow process.
Yeah.
Like it was like person on the left criticizing people on the left. Then it was like, okay, maybe centrism is cool. And then
Right.
slowly, okay, maybe this right winger has a point. Okay, maybe they have 2 points. And then it just slowly evolved from there.
What would you say was the most extreme belief that you actually sort of incorporated into your set of beliefs?
The belief to ban all immigration coming into the U.S.
That's interesting.
That was-
A bunch of
that
the
was a big
people that
one.
have called in and said that they were pulled into the right and then got out of it, a lot of them say that they were pulled into the right with immigration related, sort of pseudo-nationalist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant stuff. That is interesting. I mean, it's anecdotal. It's just people who call me, but that is notable that a bunch of them mention that.
Oh yeah, it's a big thing. Getting pulled is the immigration thing.
Yeah. Joseph, listen, I'm glad you got out and appreciate you telling me your story.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks for taking my call.
Take care. Appreciate it, Joseph. Seemed to have a strange kind of like delay going on with Joseph. It was weird. I don't know if that's in the system or that was just the call with Joseph. Let's try our caller from the 570 area code. Who's calling today from 570?
Jordan from Pennsylvania.
Hey, Jordan, what's going on?
Well, there's a lot of anger about censorship online and social media. And I thought about something. The government funds the roads. The government funds the library.
Right.
And other social services. Why can't they fund a public access internet? It's non-commercial.
Some places
you can go
do.
on. You're protected by the law.
Some places have it.
And you can just... Why can't it be like a whole national thing? And that
Right.
can take the place of YouTube and all that other stuff. What do you
Well,
think
hold
of
on a
that?
second. You're confusing two things now. So YouTube is a platform, not an internet service provider. And by the way, I'm hearing my own voice echoing back. So if I'm on speaker, please take me off. Are you talking about the government running a social media platform or the government running the internet utility?
Both.
Oh, okay. I don't know that I see the advantage of the government necessarily running the social platform, although it's an interesting idea. But there are places like, for example, out in Western Massachusetts, near where the show started, there's a place called Leverett. And Leverett, and maybe it's Shutesbury, maybe it's both. They're really small places, so they're not that interesting for like Comcast to come into, but they have municipal broadband. They have established municipal broadband services. The town owns it. It's cheaper than what a lot of the for-profit companies provide. That's super interesting to me. I guess I haven't given much thought to the government, like a government Facebook or YouTube. I don't know that I'd have to think more about that, but the government getting involved in running some of these utilities, or at least the regulation of these internet service providers as utilities, which is part of net neutrality ideas, that is very important. And I would be very much supportive of that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of anonymous people harassing and people trying to make a quick dollar. And I think the internet would be better for the intellectuals if you just got rid of that.
But are you saying you want all websites to be run by the government? I mean, it sounds a little crazy.
No, you would have an option. You can either, go to the public library or go to the bookstore and pay.
Yeah.
Your choice.
So there would be an
non-commercial
internet where the content is run by the government, and then another internet where people can put up the stuff they want.
Yeah, regulated by the government. You're protected by the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Something like a public access television.
I don't know that it totally works, but because, there's already websites that are run by all sorts of people, governments and individuals, but the municipal broadband piece is really important, and I'm very much behind that. Appreciate the phone call. Thank you very much. I hope to hear from you again. Let's go next to the caller from the 313 area code. Who's calling today from 313?
Hi, David. My name is Kevin. I'm calling from Detroit, Michigan.
Hey, Kevin, what's going on?
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
I'm a really huge fan, and
Thank
I just had a quick question. I like to become more politically informed.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself when I try to find out like things on issues, depending on the website, it's like kind of biased in certain ways.
Okay.
And I just trying to figure out a way. How do you become so politically informed? And the way you do it, you seem like you're so. You look at it from so many different perspectives, and I really envy that, and I want to be more like that. So I was wondering, how do you do that?
Well, the most important thing is when you want to really understand an issue, you're not going to understand it by reading liberal and conservative opinion pieces written today, right? Like if you really want to understand abortion, it's like, okay, you can go and see what a liberal blog says and what a conservative blog says about the latest Arkansas proposal. But to really understand it, you actually want to be reading the history of the abortion debate in the United States to kind of build up the pyramid of knowledge, so to speak. So the problem that I see for a lot of people who end up very sort of uninformed or at least short-sighted on political issues is that if you imagine a pyramid, the base of the pyramid is like knowing how to think. It's critical thinking and it's basics of philosophy. Then you've got to understand how government works. So it's like basic civics. We're building up this pyramid. Then it's particular issues, the history of abortion, for example. Only the very top of the pyramid, it's sort of like the junk food in the old dietary pyramid that was floating around. The latest news about X or Y is like the junk food. It's the very thinnest part of the pyramid. And if you skip to that, you're not really going to know how to even think about a lot of these issues or understand how they became political issues to begin with. So I think the important thing is separate from the day-to-day news as much as possible and read about the history of these issues, read about critical thinking and sort of how to think and epistemology. That's the best advice I can give.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. With my job, I'm actually in the Marine Corps, and I'm also a black man. So a lot of times I get.
Oh no! Whatever you're saying sounds
unbiased.
Super interesting, but you just cut out. You said you're a black man in the Marine Corps, and sometimes you get what? You cut out right there.
I get pulled into like a lot of political debates, despite my best efforts to avoid it.
I see.
So,
and you would like to just be more informed in those debates. It sounds like.
Right. I generally lean towards the left, but I just don't want to cite off CNN or Fox. It was definitely not Fox News, but
yeah.
I don't want to cite off just some like headline,
Your instinct is the right one, and I would really try to build up the lower stages of that kind of knowledge pyramid. Kevin, really appreciate the phone call. Hope to hear from you again.
Definitely. Take care, David. Thank you.
See you later. Take care. Okay, let's go maybe to a local caller from the 508 area code. Who's calling today from 508?
Hey, it's Brandon. How you doing?
Hey, Brandon. Where are you calling from?
I am in the New England area. I don't really want to give my location, but I'm just going to tell you that.
It's not Brockton, is it? Please tell me it's not Brockton.
It is definitely not Brockton.
Okay. Brockton's fine. I'm half kidding, but I just saw 508. What's on your mind today?
Yeah. So I'm kind of a unique caller. I grew up in a conservative type family. Grew up conservative myself through college, and then during college I joined the military. Was in the military for a while being in college, and then right now I'm a full-time police officer.
Okay.
So why I think, because I feel like I'm in a unique situation. I used to be very conservative, and now I'm super left-leaning, I guess. And within two jobs or two career paths that I find that are very conservative. So I find myself all the time, debating these issues, with your show, with Kyle's show that was mentioned before. And I don't know, I just find I don't see many people out there who, fit my description who feel the same way,
That's interesting. I mean, you don't, without you don't have to say where you are, but I think there's a lot of places in the 508 area code, which even though they're in Massachusetts, they're relatively blue collar conservative places. So I'm not shocked to hear that the majority of the people in law enforcement are relatively conservative, since I think my instinct is from people I know, whatever like the politics are of a place, law enforcement is always slightly to the right of that. So like as a counterexample, in Northampton, Massachusetts, where the show started, which is a very left-leaning place, the police department is still quite left-leaning. The police chief right now is a lesbian officer, and the police participate in the Pride Parade and all this stuff. But still, like in general, that police force is still to the right of Northampton, Massachusetts, if that makes sense. So I'm not super surprised to hear that.
Right. Yeah. I just, it's funny because I was at, work the other night, and everyone assumed that because, I was a police officer that I felt, or I had my political, I leaned right.
Yep.
Which is the opposite of the case.
Right.
So I don't know. I just, I like talking politics. I'm like a political junkie, and I love the stuff, but I don't know. I just haven't found anyone else really who feels the same way, at least in my, in my demographic.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I think I would look at some of the departments out in Western Mass. I mean, but does this cause problems for you with your coworkers?
Absolutely not, because I find them very educated about politics and about stuff like that, and they are very stuck into identity politics, and whatever the president says is like, is right, and that's just kind of like the debates we have, and I'm known as like the liberal police officer, and but no, I just want to also say, because I know you get a lot of people that listen to your show, that we are people in law enforcement are out there, and we do there are some of us that do think this way, so I just wanted to kind of make that known as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and we have many left-leaning law enforcement, current and former folks in the membership as well. So I appreciate the phone call.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
All right, take care. And on that note, we will go to a break. Thanks to everybody that called in. Many, many more stories to discuss coming up next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So yesterday I told you that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has an opponent who actually could be quite strong. Her name's Amy McGrath. And Mitch McConnell, as I've told you over the years, as Senate Majority Leader, has been a very effective Republican operative for all of the reasons that I've previously laid out and I told you yesterday. And it would be close to as important, close to as big of an accomplishment, I would say, to remove Mitch McConnell in 2020 as it would be to remove Donald Trump in 2020. But as I told you yesterday, without rehashing the entire story, Kentucky is very red. There are real obstacles for Amy McGrath, who's a former Marine fighter pilot. But there's at least some good news early that gives us some sense of hope, and at least the idea that this is a race that is worth investing time and money into. Amy McGrath has raised more than $2.5 million in the first 24 hours running against Mitch. And if you thought that Lindsey Graham's opponent, Jaime Harrison, was doing well by raising $1.5 million in general against Lindsey Graham, Amy McGrath has raised $2.5 million in 24 hours. And the McGrath campaign is claiming, and at least for now, I haven't been able to find conflicting information. The McGrath campaign claims that $2.5 million in the first 24 hours is a record for the first 24 hours of any Senate campaign period, which sort of sounds like a big claim. But I researched it this morning and I was not able to find anything to contradict it. Average donation to Amy McGrath is about $36. The $2.5 million does not include money that was sent in via checks written during the first 24 hours, but which will, of course, not be received for another couple of days. And money also pledged, but not yet given, which I don't know exactly. Maybe at fundraisers, money can be pledged, but they don't immediately necessarily collect it. I don't know where this started, but I like the sound of when you do the math, you choose McGrath. I think that that's a nice little slogan for her. Also, an anti-Mitch McConnell slogan would be something like, let's put a hurdle in front of the turtle, which is absolutely fantastic. And maybe Amy McGrath will be the person to do that. It's the candidate who served her country against the guy who only ever serves himself. I saw that one on Reddit somewhere. Now, once again, managing expectations. I told you yesterday, this will be tough. Kentucky is very red. Just because lots of Kentucky Republicans don't like Mitch McConnell, and many of them don't, that doesn't mean that they're going to go out and vote for a Democrat in November of 2020. Many would prefer a different Republican, but in the end will either vote for Mitch McConnell over a Democrat or simply not vote at all. But there is a chance here. In 2008, McConnell won by just 6 points. In 2014, McConnell won by 16 points. So in a presidential election year, it was way closer than in a midterm. All we can do is run each race. Graham and McConnell are two races I'm going to be watching. I was tweeting yesterday with J.D. Scholten. You might remember J.D. Scholten ran against a totally disgusting, xenophobic white nationalist. I don't know that I'd call him a white nationalist, but sensitive to white nationalism or coddler of white nationalism, Steve King, in Iowa in 2018. And I met J.D. Scholten at Netroots Nation last year. Last year. And I asked him whether he's planning to run again in 2020 against Steve King. And he says he hasn't made a decision yet. That would be a really great race as well. So things are getting going. I'll be telling you about interesting races as I see them. Let me know if there are specific 2020 races that you want me to cover. I will tell you, it's difficult for us to do a lot of pre-primary interviews because in a lot of these races where there's, for example, an incumbent Republican, there will be 6 Democrats running in the primary, and they all want to be interviewed on the show. And we can't really turn the David Pakman show, as I've said before, like into the California 7th District show. So interviews are tough, at least pre-primary, but we do want to spotlight important races where either Republicans could be knocked off or corporate Democrats are potentially going to go down. So let me know what races I should be following. Okay, I want your help with something. This actually does not have anything to do with the YouTube issues that we're experiencing. Every once in a while, I just like to reflect on the format of the show and think about what changes we might be able to make to improve the show based on changing demands, changing interests from the audience and the different platforms that we're on, sort of shifting and reevaluating. And very often we'll consider a change and then we'll end up not doing anything because the consensus ends up being keep doing things the way that you're doing. What you're doing is working, at least to some degree. Don't fix something that's not broken. But we've, in the past, also sometimes made good changes to the show, which from my perspective have improved it, and the show has continued to grow. So in a sense, they weren't bad decisions, at least not obviously so. So remember that for every idea I'm about to suggest to you, the constraint we have is that we're doing a daily TV and radio show that's an hour long. So we're working within that time frame of an hour in order for the show to fit in to the format of the nearly 200 TV and radio affiliates that we have. That's the show that gets chopped up into pieces for YouTube and turned into our daily audio podcast. So don't freak out. All of these are just ideas. They're based on things I've heard from the audience most frequently, but none of these are changes we're necessarily making. These are just ideas that I will open the door to hear from you about. Number one, a lot of interview-related ideas. Some people don't like the interviews on the show. They just want to hear commentary. There's no rule that says we have to keep doing interviews. We've done something like 1,500 interviews on the show. Booking interviews is time-intensive. We could eliminate interviews altogether, and we could add stories. So instead of doing 6 stories per show, we could get rid of interviews and do 8 stories per show. We could cut the interviews but not add any stories, meaning we'll still do 6 stories, but we can devote a little more time to each of those 6 stories. We could cut interviews and cut the number of stories to only 4, which would mean the show would become, instead of sort of like a summary of what happened in the last 24 hours or over the weekend, we would choose 4 stories and cover each story for about 15 minutes, but we would only be covering 4 things per day. That would change the nature of the show. We could extend the interviews, make them longer, but cut them to only a couple of times a week. So instead of 4 13 to 15 minute interviews per week, we would do just a couple, but they could be a half hour long instead of just 13 to 15 minutes. We could do one interview per week, and it would be the entire show. So imagine that maybe Wednesday, the show, instead of being news and analysis, is just an hour interview with someone who warrants an hour of discussion. And then the rest of the week would be just news stories. Those are some ideas. Live calls. Now, I know that the live calls are controversial. We did a poll about live calls previously, and overwhelmingly, the audience did want to keep live calls, even though lots of people hate them and want them to go. So live calls are not on the chopping block right now, but we could change when and how we do live calls. So right now, we do live calls on the Friday show. And then at the end of Monday through Thursday's shows, I'll play a voicemail from the audience and react to it. We could instead look at, for example, getting rid of the voicemail segment, getting rid of a half hour of live calls on Friday, and just do 2 or 3 live calls at the end of each show. So we get rid of voicemails. We do like 10 minutes of live calls at the end of each show, but there's no big block of 30 minutes of calls on Friday. That's a possibility. There are more logistics for that because we'd need to open the phone lines every day unless we recorded all the calls at once, which would make some of them maybe stale and outdated. It is more work on our end, but it's an idea. And as many of you know, I'm all about ideas. I'm all about big ideas, small ideas, medium ideas, stale ones, new ones, whatever. I'm throwing them out to you. So here is how I want to hear from you about this. Only by email. There's a reason why. It's too easy to just put up a poll on Twitter or on our website or on YouTube and let people vote and just click something without really thinking about it. And the thing is that most people often don't want anything changed, but if they're given a list of options, they'll just pick something and we get sort of cloudy data. If you actually care enough to want something changed on the show, whether it's from the options I mentioned or something different altogether, email me through the contact form at davidpakman.com. Okay, davidpakman.com, click on contact, fill out that form and tell me which of these ideas you like, if any. Tell me if you want everything to stay as it is. Tell me if there's a change that you would like that I have not mentioned, okay? All of these ideas and others I'm willing to consider. And the advantage of having to email me instead of just clicking a poll is that if you, number one, have an idea I didn't mention, we can also include it and consider it. I want those as well. But if you want nothing changed, that's also useful to hear, because if 80% of the audience writes in and says, David, don't change anything, that's important for us to hear. The whole point here is the show is for you. I want the show to be what people want in terms of the format. Obviously, I'm going to still pick the guests. I'm going to still cover the stories I want to cover. But as far as the format goes, let me know what you think. I'll give it like a week or so, and then I will come to you with the results and whatever decisions we make about the format of the show. We have a voicemail number, at least for now, unless the audience says they want it changed. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is an idea from a conservative who says the entire premise of the show is wrong. The entire focus of my political philosophy is wrong. And this should basically just become a right-wing show. Take a listen to this.
Well, I really don't like to use this language, but I can't think of anything else. You're so full of shit. I mean, seriously, you need to grow up and you need to realize that the progressive movement is not going to help us do anything. You need to change your allegiances and start supporting conservative ideals, because progressive ideals will lead us to nothing but the sewer. Actually, you're going to run the country into the ground. People like you and people like all these progressive idiots who think, oh, free this, free that. Nothing's free, brother. And I figured you'd be old enough to know that, but obviously you're not.
Right.
You know, my phone number is, if you've got the balls, call me back and I'll argue with you. If not, you know what? I think you should go on Hannity's show and tell him face to face what you say to him behind his back.
That's the best idea so far. I would love to go on Hannity's show and talk to him face to face. Anytime he wants to have me, I'll be there. There's this funny idea that you sometimes hear from the right that progressive ideas are childish, and once you grow up or mature, you sort of grow out of those progressive ideas. And it's so laughable to me because, number one, it's based on the false premise that people become more conservative as they get older. What the case is that successively younger generations are more to the left for their entire lives. There's not actually evidence that individuals become more conservative as they age that I've seen. Willing to have my mind changed on that. But the idea of the childish and immature ideas being on the left, The right believes, in great part, that taxes are slavery, or at least should be almost completely eliminated, and that abortion is murder, and that tax cuts for the rich stimulate the economy. I have a hard time thinking of any more childish and immature ideas than those. So those in glass houses definitely shouldn't be throwing stones. And as far as calling this guy, listen, I'm a little busy producing the show and running an ad agency to call and have off-air conversations with people. But I welcome you. And in fact, I invite you to call in when we take live calls. And I would love to have a conversation with you about the supposedly immature progressive ideas. On the bonus show today, a court has sided with the Trump administration in a lawsuit over hotel profits. That is an important decision, actually. Disneyland has experienced a brawl, and the case related to that brawl has been sent to Orange County prosecutors by the police department. And Pete Buttigieg has proposed a broad plan to counter racial inequality. And it has some interesting things in it, has some ideas that I think are good ones, some ideas that are a little bit more of a question mark. And we will be talking about all of those ideas and many other big ideas. I'm going to have to be in recovery mode all weekend, actually, from so many high-level ideas. On today's bonus show, get instant access to it by becoming a member at joinpacman.com or by making a pledge on Patreon at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.